Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we're piecing together the transformation of work one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we'll continue to explore the human parts of the future of work. In a world increasingly shaped by technology, we need to do a really good job of understanding what we bring to the table. And that means we need to get better at being authentic, which includes having difficult conversations and the ability to disagree. And we need to build organizations that embrace tension without compromising trust and the ability to move forward together. To explore how we disagree, I'm joined today by Justin Jones-Fosu, a CEO of Work Meaningful, a leadership expert and employee experience researcher whose work has appeared on Oprah Daily and multiple publications. He's also the author of I Respectfully Disagree: How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. Justin, welcome to the Future of Less Work.
Thank you. I'm excited to do less work on this podcast.
It's a good one to start with. So I actually talk about the future of less work because I do believe we should be doing less of what doesn't matter and
Yes.
more of what does. And I'm curious because we usually frame disagreement as something you want to do less of, right? Minimize. But you actually talk about that as something not to avoid, but to deepen trust. So why is that?
Yeah, let me give it to you in a practical sense. So I just actually recently came back from Iceland, the 4-day backpacking trip, and I was remembering a time when I climbed Kilimanjaro. And our time climbing Kilimanjaro, there was a lot of tension within the group. There were people who thought people were slowing us down, or there was really some strong group conflict, and we didn't address it, and
Yeah.
it negatively impacted my experience. Now, juxtapose that to the Iceland trip, where there was a young lady who was taking pictures around every bend, and there was a gentleman who started murmuring under his breath, like, why are we keep on stopping? This is not just her trip. She should have picked a solo trip. It led to them arguing in the morning. And I remember going to our guide and saying, hey, we need to address this. And the guide addressed it. And initially there was still some pushback, but by the end of the trip, he was asking her to take more pictures, and he was actually taking the pictures for her. And she was not slowing down as much because she realized the impact on the group. And those two different hikes.
So what is it? What happened? Is it because she explained what she was doing? He explained what it was doing to him. What happened in this addressing the disagreement that changed it?
Well, the first thing I want to do to talk about what happened, I don't want to minimize this. It was addressed. And a lot of
Okay.
times disagreement and conflict is not addressed. And it becomes water cooler. It becomes, I'm going to talk to somebody behind their closed doors. In our model, we call that disrespectful agreement, because I might agree with you in the moment, but I never share it with you. I just disrespect you behind your back. So the first step is it was addressed. The second step is our guide allowed for opportunity to share what people felt. And so the gentleman felt like we were being slowed down. And so he at least was able to communicate that. And she was able to share how she's actually leaning more into photography. And this was a great opportunity for her to practice some of her photography skills. And so as we better understood each other's stories, it lent for more cohesion rather than negative conflict. And so that was a phenomenal opportunity.
I think about this. So this is really powerful. I always think about disagreements in the workplace that what happens if you replace the person across from you with your best friend?
Yeah.
Same job, same content, your best friend, right? And suddenly some of this stuff evaporates and it becomes just work and
Yeah.
you talk through it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
What about what did the guide do? Because I'm thinking the leader, right?
Yes.
A lot of times leaders ignore it, which is probably even worse than the
Yes.
people not addressing it, right?
Yes. Yeah. So one, I had to realize, I'm gonna be honest with you. I initially wanted to address it because I was like, I researched on this. I talk about it, but I was like, I'm not the guide. Right. So I took it to the powers that be, and I shared it with her, and she agreed. She was like, yes, I plan on addressing this. And then she opened it up and she was like, hey, I just want to lay out what we're getting ready to do today. So she talked about our joint, and this was so powerful. She talked about what we're jointly doing together. So she brought us first on commonality. Like, we're on a major hike. This is going to be awesome and exciting for all of us. You signed up for many different reasons. And then she started going trail. Some of you might have chosen this hike for different reasons. And we have to be okay realizing that we all selected a group hike, that there are different reasons that we've come to the table. And then she began to address the tension. I noticed that there was tension this morning and even yesterday. And no matter what the tension was around, she didn't dive in depth into it. Um, but I want us to be able to come back to why we're all here together from the group hike. And so she kept coming back. Now, one of the gentlemen actually wanted to address it. He was like, "Oh, I can tell you're talking about me," and she was like, I want to go into specifics. What I do want to do is for us to be able to honor that this is a group trek. We're doing this together. And for us to give space for other people to experience this trek. And so she addressed the two things, whether that means that we need to speed up a little bit more because we can't stop at all the different stops, or that means that we're allowing people to experience why they spend all this money and time to be here. And so she gave voice and acknowledged both perspectives in that time. And so that was one of the things that I think both of the parties felt heard, but she also challenged both of them at the same time.
Yeah, but she did let them voice their personal, here's kind of where I'm struggling with this, or did she
Not in
stay
that
off?
Yes. So not in that direct conversation, right? We found that out in multiple conversations, throughout. So it wasn't all
So
addressed at
it's a
one time.
process. It's not a
Yes,
one-time event. Okay, and
absolutely.
I think you call that disagreement intelligence, which I thought was a nice spin-off of emotional intelligence, right? We
Yes.
talk about that. You're saying, okay, it's not just emotional. It's actually don't be afraid to work through disagreements
Yes,
and learn
absolutely.
how to do that.
Yeah.
It's the essence of what that means, right?
Yes. And we're tighter now,
Okay,
right?
so
The group was much stronger because of that. And that's one of the
yeah,
things I
yeah.
love. That happens in workplaces all across society.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, you said you as a teammate, right? You didn't do that on your own. Do you think if you're in an organization in a team and your manager isn't working through a disagreement that a third party teammate can actually do that?
I think it can be done. It just also depends on the culture of the organization. There are some leaders that I've seen this happen where it almost feels like you're stepping on their toes. And so I always filter it back through the leader, right? So give you a great example. And my example, if our guide was not, didn't feel like she wanted to address it, I would have asked permission to be able to address it so that we could actually handle this, so it wouldn't negatively impact the hike. And I would have brought back my story of Kilimanjaro and how it actually was a negative experience. So I'd always say still try your best to filter it through the leader, in order to kind of mitigate any stepping on toes. But I always think it should be addressed, but just in the right way, in the right culture.
Yeah, one of the ways that I deal with this when I think a leader should be, even my own manager, right, should be doing something and they're not, then I consult them on whether I should be doing it, and I voice the situation, basically trying to nudge them to saying, you know what, I'll take care of it.
I love
But
that.
that's a strategy. Okay, yeah, we're going to pretend nobody's listening, and this was a secret. All right, so your book,
Yeah.
right? You have what you call 5 pillars of respectful disagreement, which I
Yes.
think is really important because that's basically you're saying, okay, we're not going to turn this into a cat fight. It's respectfully disagreeing and navigating tension, but keeping the trust. In fact, building the trust. Right?
Yes.
What are those pillars?
Yes. So at a high level macro, it's first is challenge your perspective. And that's where you intentionally put yourself in positions of learning that are things that you might disagree with. And it's before any disagreements even occur. Um, Pillar number two is be the student, where we focus more on listening and learning rather than lecturing. Pillar number three is cultivate your curiosity, where we fill in the gaps with more curiosity and questions rather than conclusions. Pillar number four is seek the gray, and it's where we find common ground, not middle ground, but common ground of ways that, even if it's just finding out how the person got there. And then pillar number five is agree to respect. And notice I didn't say agree to disagree, but agree to respect. And that's where you formulate your plan to humanize and respect not only the person you're engaging, but also yourself in the same process. And those are the 5 pillars.
You know, thank you for that. What I found really interesting is when you listen to them, you're actually putting a lot of burden to begin with on ourselves. You're basically saying sometimes we disagree because we're the ones stuck, whether not knowing, not curious, not
Mm.
trying to figure out what's going on, right? It's just us. And I think of it, we always talk about the things we don't know, right? But there's the things
Yeah.
we know, right? So we're
Mm.
this automatic reactions, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you that I found that 3 out of 5 got me to look at myself and say, "Wait a minute," before you think the disagreement needs to be resolved by the other side, right? Why
Yeah.
don't you start by looking inwards?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I love is actually number 1, pillar number 1, challenge your perspective was the last pillar we added. Because initially it was 4 pillars, but as we kept digging into the research, we found that that was actually the foundational pillar. And the reason that was is because we did a 1-year study, looked at the top 3 pages of Google searches on civility, respectful conversations, all these things. And not one of them directly dealt with what do you do before disagreements even occur. So what I've realized is a lot of the conflict resolution information materials are normally addressed to when you're in a disagreement, rather than how are you building up these muscles to make it a habit of your life. Let me give you an example. My mom used to take us to events we disagreed with. And I hated her back then for it. I was like, why are we here? We don't even agree with this, mom. But what
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
realize she was doing is she was planting these seeds of humanity in the midst of our disagreements, and that even in disagreements, that there's still a human being there. And so how often do we intentionally put ourselves in positions of learning? And I'm giving one strategy to this because it's really powerful. We call this a circles of
Please.
grace challenge. So the circles of grace challenge is what I created for myself initially because I wasn't living up to my mom's ideals, right? And it's pretty much how do I expand my circles of grace? And so every 6 to 12 months, I go to events, experiences, or I engage with people in either which I don't know a lot about or I disagree with. And I go asking 2 questions. What did I learn about this event, experiences, and or people? And what did I learn about myself as I experienced them? The more and more we do that, the better we become at hearing perspectives that are outside of our norm. And the more we're able to actually have more productive conversations in those.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. In fact, it's kind of funny, but right above my screen, I have a quote from Pocahontas Disney movie. If you
Mm,
walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew, right? And
yes,
yeah, I love that. So here's what's going through my mind. I'm going to put my HR hat on, right?
please.
We hire for what we call culture fit, right? We
Mm,
look for people in the organization that are like us. And we have all this DEI conversation about how to change that, but
yeah.
that's because naturally we don't, right? We bring in everything but disagreement.
Yeah.
I will share a story with you. I had one of my role model managers when I was, rather young in the organization. Um, he had a management team I had joined, right? And there was a person there that always disagreed, and we always got to some conclusion, and he'd always reopen the conversation. And at one time, I actually asked the manager, "So why do you keep him on?" And he said, "Well, wouldn't we'd just be talking to ourselves if he wasn't in the room, right?" And that was a huge lesson for me because he was giving this manager a hard time, but he
Yes.
basically taught me that that's what you need, right?
Yes.
Um, Tell me about this culture fit, or rather, what would you do to make sure we did exactly the opposite?
Yeah, so and I love how you said that, right? So one of the things I'm big on is defining terms because to one person, culture fit could be people who are like us, and to another person, culture fit is what do we want our culture to be, right? And so if we want our culture to be collaborative and to be creative and innovative, a cultural fit is we need people who think outside the box and think differently on different pieces because one of the things we believe in is that friction actually makes us better, right? And that's it's what if we created something together? It's why I love one of my favorite books during my MBA was a book called Dialogue: The Art of Thinking Together. And one of the
Hmm.
premises in this book is he says it's not about A and B, and that's what we normally do in these types of conversations, especially at work. It's I come in with A and I'm like, all right, Sally, Jay, I need you all to back me up, right? And then the other person has B, right? And it could be you, and you're talking to Jesse, and you're talking to
So
Katam,
now we're team A and team B, right? Yeah.
100%, right? And now I'm trying to convince you of A, and you're trying to convince me of B. But the challenge is, what if we created C together? And
Yes.
that's the beauty of um, creating and cultivating something together and being collaborative. So for culture fit, my challenge to organizations would be not to do cultural fit based on people, but the cultural fit based upon the ideology that you want to see move forward, such as collaboration, innovation, creativity. Those things could be a great cultural fit.
Yeah. And I think you're also saying build the leaders, the muscles for the leadership to be able to do all of that, not necessarily because everybody's saying A, but actually to embrace B and create C, right? I think I saw somewhere you had this framework you called heart, head, hand for
Yes.
leaders.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell
Um,
me more.
yeah. So the heart, head, hand model is simply like a lot of things that we learn. We normally go to head first, right? Because it's all about what we need to know. But the heart is, how do we feel this? What are the stories? What are the narratives that have been created? And so the first thing, whether it's leaders or not, is how does it hit here, right? Into the soul of what we do. So, great example, instead of telling you the framework, I told you a story, right? And I led with a story for you could feel what I was saying. And then I gave you the head. Well, now here's the framework, right? And then the hand is that here's the strategy, circles of grace challenge. And these are the things that I think as leaders is that we need to be able to better hear the stories of our people and help them share their stories. That's the heart. We need to be able to equip them with the tools that they need in terms of understanding the learning so that we're understanding of what we're saying. That's the head. It's one of the reasons I love when people tell me things like, oh, I don't love diversity. Now, I could immediately give you a reaction to that. But what if I went to the head and said, hey, how do you define it? Now we're able to actually communicate on the same level of, oh, this is how you define it versus this is how I define it. Now we have the hand. What do we do? What is our strategy moving forward? And so as leaders, I think being able to share the stories behind this, but allow other people to share the stories and why this matters is super, super helpful.
So I think I'm hearing you say, which I think is really, really powerful, that one of the strongest tools we have to work through disagreements is humanizing them, right?
Yes.
It's not about it's a or a B, opinion. I want to take pictures. Somebody else wants to walk fast. It's actually about here's who I am. Here's what's going on. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's why, right? And once we humanize it, it becomes an easier conversation.
Yes. I mean, just to give the example I shared earlier, the moment, oh, I felt goosebumps as you were talking. The moment she shared, I'm learning to be a photographer. It's like the whole group was like, wow. It was no longer, this is a person who is slowing us down. It became, this is a person who's leaning into an area that they're uncomfortable, and we humanized and connected to that, right? And that's what the gentleman, as he started asking, hey, you should take more pictures. Like, you're not taking enough pictures. Is the story was allowed to come forward. And that's what we have the opportunity to do as leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. Okay. So we have to talk about AI because we have to talk about AI.
Yes.
Um, and one of the things I saw you say, right, was that AI is going to take over the easy stuff, computing, analyzing, giving us data and information. And what we're left with is the hard emotional conversations, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean in terms of the skills we need to live in this AI driven world?
Yeah. Um, I lo- Let me preface this, but I love AI. I use it every single day, a lot. So I'm not the anti AI person, right? I have embraced it fully within the work that I do, but I've also realized it has its limitations. AI can't be curious for you. You have to be curious to ask questions of people. Now, AI can help solve some of the curiosity, right? You can ask it questions, but we can also ask people questions. We can ask them, well, how do you define it? AI can't tell you how I define diversity, but I can ask you that. AI can't dive deeper into creating the curiosity instead of filling in the gaps with conclusions. It can give you a lot of conclusions that people might have, the aggregate, but it can't tell you what Justin Jones-Fosu's conclusion is. And so as leaders and as individuals, we have an opportunity to what we call drive toward and forward towards some really amazing human beings. My mom, and this is why this is so big for me. I realized I didn't get this from me. I got this from my mom. And I remember interviewing my mom for the book, and I asked her, like, "Mom, where did you get this from?" And she shared a story with me. It was powerful. My mom was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force. And she shared that
Hmm.
there were some soldiers who were stationed in Japan for 2 years that never left base. She was like, "Justin, I don't want you and your brother to ever be like that, to never leave your home base and not get to experience the beauty of people and cultures around you." What these moments of human interaction, these moments of asking more questions, of being curious, of perspective taking and hearing stories is something that AI can't do from an individual to individual basis. And that's the power that we have moving forward.
Yeah, and I think as you were saying that, I was thinking about so AI almost conditions us to ask a question, get an answer. But like you said, there are nuances to answers, right? As there are, by the way, nuances to questions. Sometimes it starts by asking you questions about your
Yes.
question, but it's usually data related. And there's, you reacted to the name of my podcast, The Future of Less Work, and I talk a lot about the fact that we automatically assume that we can replace people with AI agents, right?
Mhm.
And we see a lot of that in the market and the hiring data and companies' strategies talk about reducing headcount.
Yeah.
And I think that's because we're misunderstanding the nuances of human
Yes.
contribution into the machine that we call the work and the organization because we've never had to, right? Because we did do spreadsheets and, emails. Now AI can do the spreadsheets. And if we all have our bots speak with, I'm going to have my bot write posts and your bot react to my
Right.
posts, and we'll have our bots write books. I think at some point we'll look at this and say, there's no content here.
Right.
You know, there's no heart in
Heart.
this conversation,
Yes.
right?
Oh, absolutely. And you hit my heart when you said that because I was going right there. I was like, it's the heart of it. And you don't get the heart of it in AI. You get the head of it, right? You get a lot of knowledge, a lot of things it could be, but you don't get the heart, right? And this is the powerful thing that I think as we lean into, we learn in the heart of things. Let me give another strategy because I think this can be helpful. Because people say, "Well, that sounds great, but how do I do it?" So one of the things that we've challenged people to do in getting the heart is to challenge our double Dutch style of communication. Because even if we're having conversations with people, what we found in our research is that people often aren't listening. They're listening through their own lens rather than genuinely being present to hear that person. So we gave a tool, we call it challenging your double Dutch style of communication. So with double Dutch is two ropes and somebody waiting to jump in. And that's often how we're communicating. We're waiting to jump in to say, this is what I believe. This is why you're wrong. This is why the facts are real. I learned it from
Yeah,
AI.
I'm crafting my response as I'm hearing you talk, right? Yeah.
100%. So the practical
Yeah.
tool we give is called the power of three. It's where we listen at least into the third level of the conversation. So instead of jumping back and saying, "Well, my perception is," or "what I believe," it's, well, tell me more about that," or "How do you define that?" or "How did you get that?" or "Help me to understand your journey there." And those are the places that we actually uncover the heart, and that's something that AI can't do.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, if you're in a disagreement,
Yeah.
before you talk about the I, right, spend two more questions asking about them so
Yes.
that you can then maybe learn more and get a different lens on it. You also talk, and that probably connects to this, right? But you talk about, and I mean, we think of disagreement as something that alienates others, right? You say,
Right.
no, actually, it reduces loneliness and increases belonging, which isn't necessarily intuitive. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'll connect it to the story, right? Because in the
Yeah.
story, the 2 individuals were actually better connected by the time the journey ended,
Yeah, I
because
bet.
the disagreement was addressed, because they better understood each other's story and perspective as we went along. They shared their own story, so she better understood because he was a retiree, and he was trying to get as much and see as much of Iceland as he could, right? And so as they were able to share their stories, it allowed us to find a way forward, and it created a better sense of community and belonging. But think about how we never addressed it. He would have continued with the narrative. She's slowing us down. She's selfish. She thinks this is her trip only. And she would have thought of him. He's just trying to rush through life. He doesn't value the moment. But in those moments of disagreement and addressing it, it allowed us to actually create a greater cohesion and community of belonging. And that's the power that we have. We think that not addressing it keeps the peace, but it actually hurts us.
Yeah, yeah, okay, love it. So we talked about questions and answers. I always end my podcast, because we're so used to answering questions, right? With a request for a question versus an answer. So here's what I would like to hear from you. What is the question you think we should all be asking ourselves about the future of work?
The question that resonates the most with me, that I'd love for us to ask, is how can I bring meaning to my work? That's the question. It's not, is my work
So make sure
meaningful?
you're
Yeah.
in values space, right?
Yeah. It's
Is that
not,
what
is
you
my work
mean? Yeah.
meaningful? It's not, am I doing work that matters? And a lot of our research, um, our focus has been on how we bring meaning to our work, not find it. And so the question I'd like all of us to ask is, how can I bring meaning to my work, in either perspective on how I choose how to see it, in either the task, what I choose to do, or the relationships, who I choose to engage. But it's always our choice. And so that would be the question, is how can I bring meaning to my work?
So you're saying, okay, this is really important. You're saying don't just work within something that's meaningful, but
Yes.
bring meaning into whatever it is that you're working on or in.
Absolutely. It stems in original job crafting research by 2001 by Wisniewski and Dutton. And it's a really powerful opportunity for us to engage people right where they are, so that we can bring meaning no matter what job we have, no matter our title, no matter even the compensation, is that we can always choose to bring meaning to our work. And that would be the question.
Thank you for that. Wow. Thank you, Justin, for joining me today. For more about Justin, his book, I Respectfully Disagree, and the work he's doing at Work Meaningful, check out the links in the podcast description. Thank you for joining us. And please remember, your best people do not work because they have to, nor because you measure them on it or you tell them to. They work because they want to, because by working for you, they're doing whatever it is that it's important to them in life. Till next time.